Last Sunday we returned to 1 Samuel chapter 15, and I told you that it would be our third and final lesson from chapter 15. But I didn't tell you quite the truth, because I began to read this week the last bit of chapter 15 and the first part of chapter 16. And I thought there was something that we ought to say. It's the last time that we really find Samuel being the center of attention in these scriptures. We'll mention him next week, but quickly Samuel is going to fade from anything in these pages of the book of 1 Samuel. But I want to show you something special about Samuel's life this morning, and really the lesson comes in two parts. We'll look at that, and then we'll look at the first part of chapter 16. It's the second part that I've been concerned about. You know, I've known about the second part of this lesson for years and years and years. And every time I've ever tried to teach it, every time I've come to this in some kind of format, I have either glossed over it or I've skipped it because simply I didn't know what to do with it. And I got to thinking about it, and I couldn't remember ever sitting in a class where someone talked about this. I don't ever remember sitting in an assembly where someone talked about this. But if we're going to have integrity with Scripture, we probably ought to not skip very much material. We probably ought to see what's really happening. And so we're going to try that this morning. Just warning you, the second part of this lesson is going to be something that challenges all of our thinking. And frankly, I don't know the answer. And frankly, I wish I would have skipped it. But we're going to deal with it this morning. So as you're in chapter 15, there's some unfinished business. Saul, the king, has been told to go kill all the Amalekites. He kills every single Amalekite except for one, and that's the king, whose name is Agag. And so as the chapter ends, this old retired leader, prophet, priest, Samuel, takes a sword, and he plunges that sword through Agag and kills Agag. Now, I thought that was interesting because I began to wonder, and I don't know what the truth really is about it, but don't you suspect that this may be the first time in all of his many years that he's killed someone? In fact, I even wonder if he's ever held a sword before. But Agag needs to die, and Samuel takes it upon himself to do it. Now, at this point, it says that Samuel goes one direction, Saul goes another. And it says all the remaining days of Samuel's life, he and Saul will never see each other again. Never again will Samuel see Saul or Saul see Samuel. And right at the end, it says one more thing that I want you to see. It says that Samuel mourned or grieved over Saul. In fact, as you begin chapter 16, God's asking Samuel a question. I don't know how much time has passed. He's gone back home. I don't know how much time's passed, but God's asking a question. How long will you mourn over Saul, since I have rejected him as king? And I begin to wonder about that. Not how long you're going to mourn, but why is he mourning? In one sense, you'd think Samuel is happy. Finally, we're going to get rid of Saul, who's become such a bad king, but instead, he is grieving over it. Here's what I think is special about that. Samuel has been the leader for years and years and years. And now he's handing the roles over to leadership to another person, his successor. And Samuel is going to display for us this morning a beautiful, unselfish heart that God wanted. In contrast to Saul, remember, Saul has this inability to trust. He leans more on his own understanding. Saul is the one who's become very selfish in his heart. His selfishness has led to pride, but not Samuel. Samuel is very, very unselfish. Why do I say that? Well, some of you have been in a job for a long time, or maybe it's a role of leadership for a long time, but your time has passed. That's the way life works, isn't it? We have a purpose, we have a role to play, time passes, Our time of that purpose, that role, comes to an end, just like it did for Samuel. And we, in turn, hand it off to someone else. I've done that a few times in my life. I have worked a place, done things, poured my life into it, only to hand it off to someone else. Here's what I know from experience. I'm not proud of it, but tucked deep in my heart somewhere, there's this little feeling that I sure hope they don't do exceedingly well as my successor, because if they do really, really well, the people will like them better than they like me, or the people will think they're so much better than I was, and you have all these feelings that are kind of selfish feelings come out. But Samuel, not a bit of that. Samuel wants the best for the people, and to have the best for the people whom he loves, you have to have the best kind of leader. He wants Saul to be an outstanding success. It appears that Samuel even wants Saul to be better as a leader than he. What an unselfish, special, devoted heart he had toward God. It's really the kind of heart that God wants from all of us. He wants us to have this unselfish devotion toward him. And you may be thinking what I thought at the beginning. Well, but this is Samuel. Samuel was kind of born into being trained to be God's man. And Samuel's done this all life. He's not an ordinary person. But then I got to thinking, that's really not true. Because if you think back, Samuel had family problems. He had 2 sons that were accepting bribes and doing other things, and they were unfit in their character for leadership. He had family troubles. That sounds like some of us. And as you begin chapter 16, it appears that Samuel even encounters a circumstance where he ends up being afraid. Though God tells him to do something, he ends up being afraid. And so he may be more like us than we realize. He just cultivated in his heart a heart of unselfishness that was totally devoted to God. So I want you to see how special he is. And now we begin the other part. The part I kind of wish I'd have skipped. Because as God begins chapter 16, recording this for us, he asks Samuel this question: how long are you going to mourn or grieve since I have rejected Saul as king? Now, fill your horn with oil, and I want you to go to Bethlehem. Bethlehem's a little tiny, obscure, out of the way, nothing village. I want you to fill your horn with oil, go to Bethlehem, and I want you to anoint, it says, one of the sons of Jesse whom I have chosen to be king. Well, that sounds simple enough, except here's where I think Samuel becomes afraid. Because listen to what he asks God. How can I go? Saul will hear about it, and Saul will kill me. Again, I don't know how much time has passed, but apparently Samuel has seen in Saul what we will all see even before the 16th chapter begins to come to an end. That Saul has become, in his selfishness and his pride and in his insecurity, more irrational, more emotionally unstable. And Samuel's got it figured out. If he finds out I'm going to go and anoint a new king, he'll kill me. What are we going to do? And so God says this: take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. And invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I'll show you what to do. You will anoint one of his sons, the one I indicate. Now, that's the little passage that I'm concerned about this morning. When you read that passage, what do you think? How can I go? If I go, Saul will find out. Saul will kill me. What am I going to do? So God says, all right, we'll do this. Lead a heifer. Tell them you've come to offer sacrifice. Jesse and his sons will come to the sacrifice. You'll anoint one of them. Now, in our day and time, in the way we think, that sounds like they're not telling all the truth. Does it sound like that to you? Or they provided kind of a mechanism, or maybe you call it a scheme, to to make it look one way and it's really another way. Or it's kind of half-truth. At least that's what it seems to me. And God's doing this for Samuel's benefit. But then I come into this problem that's always rolled around in my mind. God is holy. The foundation of Scripture, the absolute foundation of the Bible is that God is holy and that He's set apart and that He's perfect and that He's pure and that He absolutely cannot sin. That's why in the New Testament it will say it is impossible for God to lie. God can't deceive. God can't lie. God is perfectly pure in every possible way. So how do I reconcile what's just been said? Because when we do this, it kind of seems like a half-truth, and it kind of seems like it's not right, and it kind of seems like we're deceiving, and it kind of seems like a lie. Oh, I tell you, it's a difficult thing, isn't it? I know you may not agree with what I'm about to say. That's perfectly fine. I think even Sue's indicated to me last night she didn't agree with what I'm about to say. But I'm wondering. I'm just wondering out loud with you. It'd be better if we were face to face, wouldn't it? But I'm wondering out loud if maybe our definition of deceit might need to be altered just a little bit. So let me say it like this. If I tell you a half-truth, or if I provide just a little mechanism that leads you to a different thought, if I kind of have a little bit of different persuasion on what I'm saying to you, for my benefit, I'm doing it for my benefit, that is indeed selfishness, and that is indeed deceit, that is indeed a lie, and that is indeed sin. If I am doing this for my benefit, it's wrong. But here's what I'm wondering. What if I don't tell you all the truth? What if I hold back a part? And I do it out of graciousness, and I do it out of kindness, and I do it out of love for your benefit. I have nothing to gain. I'm doing it for your benefit. Is that really wrong? Well, that's where I'm scratching my head, literally. Because I think maybe doctors do this frequently. You go in for an examination, then the doctor runs all these tests. The results come back. She, from her experience and from her training, looks at all the results and she knows deep down inside this does not look good at all. In fact, this is really, really bad. And yet when she comes and talks to you, she doesn't want to tell you all of this. She doesn't want to dash your hopes. Out of graciousness, out of kindness toward you, she doesn't say it quite like she thinks. Is that wrong? Is that something she shouldn't be doing? Then I thought, as parents, how often have I done that as a parent for the child? I didn't tell them everything. I thought there were some things they didn't need to know for their benefit, for their good. If I did it for my benefit, my good, that'd be wrong. I know we do it as husbands and wives. In fact, Sue's told me this story this week. I think it was this week. Apparently, my brother-in-law, Charles Greenbold, is about to have a birthday. Now, I don't know if it's 75 or 80. I'm not sure what it is. Wait a minute, Charles, that's a joke. If you're watching, Charles, that's a joke. Zonell, that's a joke. But Zonell's thinking about his birthday coming. So she finds out over in Oklahoma City they're going to have this entertainment over there called some entertaining group that does clogging. I don't know what clogging is. It must be old people's entertainment. No, there I go again. I'm sorry. Charles Zonell, I'm sorry. Well, wait a minute. You know, I put up with this all my life. Charles is the favorite son-in-law in our Cox family. My mother-in-law, Nell, it's Charles this, it's Charles that. I've had to put up with that all these years. So maybe there is a little touch of selfishness, Charles. But anyway, Charles finds out about the clogging. And Zonell has already kind of made arrangements. Now, that's all since been canceled because of the virus stuff. But Zonell had made arrangements, but Charles finds out about it. He's wanting to go, and he says, Zonell, they're going to be in Oklahoma City this particular time. And Someone else says, well, that's the weekend Jesse and her husband Jackson are coming. And just drops it. Doesn't tell Charles the whole thing. Was it for her benefit she didn't say? No. It was out of love for Charles, as out of graciousness and out of kindness, that she was not telling the whole thing for the moment. Now he's since found out all that's taken care of, but don't we do that? There's not a husband alive that hasn't been through this experience. Your wife goes out and buys a new dress, or she gets a new hairdo, and she comes home and she's so happy and she can't wait to show you. And she says, how does this dress look? And I think, oh my, I don't know if I like that dress that well. I don't know if it fits that well. And so I say, well, oh, the color is beautiful. It matches the tone of your skin so well, and that material, it must be so comfortable. And I try to end there because out of love and out of kindness and out of graciousness, I don't always say everything. And sometimes I say only part of it. And I find myself wondering this morning, our God is a gracious God. Yes, he's holy, but he's gracious. And so Samuel, his old servant who has done so well, he's got an unselfish heart. He's cultivated it through all these years. But he ends up apparently being afraid. And he says, if I go and do this, Saul's going to find me and kill me. And God says, all right, let's just take a heifer. Let's offer a sacrifice. Jesse will come. It doesn't seem like all the real story, and it kind of seems like it's avoiding something, but God is gracious, and he's doing this for the benefit of Samuel. Well, you'll have to decide. You have to decide what all that means. And maybe it's not all that important, but then maybe for me to re-examine in my life what constitutes deceit and selfish lying and trying to benefit myself, maybe it's worth considering for a moment this morning. Well, here we are. Samuel is a man of unselfishness, but he's a man like us, and God is gracious toward him. Now, I want to segue from that. We're going to take our memorial feast here in a moment, but I want to segue from that with this thought. I often think that we don't think about this memorial feast quite like maybe we should, at least to the depth that we should. But our God, in all of his holiness, was so loving and so gracious that he was willing to come to the earth in the form of his son. I don't think any of us can imagine what that would have been like. Hey, do you know that his son was born in that same little town of Bethlehem? That obscure, out-of-the-way place of Bethlehem? And then after that little baby was born, the Son of God was born. The king, Herod, finds out about it and wants to try to kill him. And so God sends him off to Egypt for a while. And then he ends back up at Nazareth, another obscure, no-place village. And he lives there for all those years as a carpenter's son. And finally, at about the age of 30, he begins his public ministry. And we get to begin to see God in the flesh and how he lives on this earth. We have 4 books in the Bible that really tell us that story. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They are special, special books where Jesus is presented to us. That's why I think we ought not to ever get very far from them. We ought to study the Gospels often because we learn about what Jesus was really like. And by the way, our mission in this life, more than anything else, our mission as Christians is to have our lives transformed into the likeness of Jesus. How can we do that unless we see Jesus on this earth? But then it all comes to an end, a tragic end. Jesus is killed by way of crucifixion. Yes, it's humiliating, but it's far more than humiliation. It's a pain, a misery that no one can describe. And he does all that. Though he was the creator of the world and though he was rich in the heavens, he became poor so that you and I might become rich in him, saved.